Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is abundance teacher and money coach, Jody Lynn Creighton.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
Now, I have to say, I'm especially happy that you're joining us today because I was engaging in one of my favorite habits just before we came on here. I was out taking my daily constitutional, my walk, my 4-mile walk.
Nice.
And it was beautiful. I mean, the temps were in the low to mid 60s and, not a cloud in the sky and all that. Just absolutely idyllic weather for walking and just beautiful. So, if we're going to start off a conversation about habits, I figure we might as well start with a really good one. There's one right there.
How do you make that happen every day? Like, what's the process that brings you up or gives you the reminder?
It's been a habit for years. I started this habit 20 years ago. And if you know how it is with a habit, if you can just keep going with it, at first I couldn't walk more than a half mile. I just didn't have the energy for it, but I would just go out every day, even if it was a quarter mile. If I walked a block, okay, I walked a block. At least I was establishing the habit of getting out there. Mm-hmm. And within probably a month or two, all of a sudden it was a habit that if I stopped doing it, I'd notice it. Mm-hmm. So it's actually been pretty easy since then. The hard parts have been, middle of the winter and it's too damn cold to go out there. Now I have to deal with, oh God, I'm in withdrawal on my habit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the way it is with me. I mean, Jody Lynn, you have like morning routines and so forth. What do you have habits that have been so long ingrained that you have that same feeling of withdrawal when you go through them?
Yeah, I think like the way that I get ready in the morning and like the simple things that I do are pretty ingrained. But I find I experience the same things with you. I'll ingrain something new or whatever, and then the cold takes over and I'm like, Yeah.
Yep. And Jason, you know a lot about cold too, because of where you are, you're in Idaho, so you're going to get plenty of that there.
Yeah. And it is a struggle that, I like to get out. My wife and I particularly like to go on walks. I like to get out and run, but I'm so, if it's below a certain temperature or above a certain temperature, I'm like, nope, not doing it. So then I just end up on the exercise bike, which is good. It's always good to move the body, but it doesn't have the same impact of being outside, fresh air, seeing the sky, feeling the sun. It's just not quite the same. So there is added benefit to getting outside for sure.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So, but anyway, you're the habits expert. That's one of the reasons we have you on the show here today. In fact, you have a book out, Happily Ever Habits. Where'd that title come from? I like that one.
Yeah. So I've read a lot of habit books and articles. I found that most of them focused on habits that we're all pretty interested in around health habits, wealth habits, and I utilized a lot of those tactics to try to eat better, try to exercise more consistently, try to floss more regularly because I always hated going to the dentist and then be like, have you been flossing? And I'd say, does today count? And so
yeah, 9 o'clock this morning.
Yes. In fact, this is a true story. One time I walked into the dentist a few minutes late and I said, I am so sorry I'm late. I was flossing. And they thought that was a great, fully legitimate reasoning for having been late. But what I found was that all of those things are great. I found myself in my life in need of focusing on habits intentionally designed to help me be happier and kind of live a happier life and experience more happiness in my life, because there were just a lot of times of, being kind of down, feeling like I wasn't as happy as I wanted to be, not experiencing what I thought was maybe the happiness that I should or could experience as a result of having acquired many of the things that I had been trying so hard to acquire through my 20s and 30s. Now here I am in my 40s and I was thought, my gosh, why Am I not as happy as I thought I would be once I had all of these things? So you finally get to having a house, having cars, having a good job, stable family environment, all of these things. And you're like, yeah, but I'm not happy. So I wrote the book in an effort to solidify my own thinking and processes around, I need to be as intentional in things that bring happiness as I am in things that help me maybe be healthier. And these things all tie together. It is true that when you're healthier, you're happier. There is a reality that if you are in some level of financial distress, it does impact your happiness. But at a certain point, it's just, I've got to do stuff specifically designed to kind of encourage happiness. And that's where this came from.
Oh, I love that.
You're reminding me of a quote from Richard Bach, who was the author of a number of different novels, including his most famous one, Jonathan Livingston's Seagull, which came out in the 1960s.
Yeah.
He also wrote a book called Illusions, which was my favorite novel. And in that book, he has a great quote. He says, "We teach best that which we most need to learn." And that's exactly what you were doing with your book. You were teaching what you needed to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. And the title came from just interacting with some people and, hey, what's the concept here? And what's the real idea? And the real idea is that, as everybody knows, happily ever after doesn't just happen. It is a creation through your habits of how you get there. And so that was kind of the fun connection of a few ideas, is this happily ever habits.
Have you ever thought of that, Jody Lynn? Have you thought about habits as a way to happiness?
Yes.
Oh, yeah?
I have experienced the not quite like polar opposite of that, but it's interesting. Habits and I had a very bad relationship for a while.
Okay.
I was very, I'm an A-type personality, but I grew up in the financial industry and in this business that I have and that I'm in. And, the people that were teaching me, they'd be like, you got to do the daily 5, you got to do the 5 things every single day. And whatever they were, make calls, read your goals, do this, whatever. Right. And I would kill myself literally trying to do these things. And I learned a lot of good things stepping back from that, like how to set myself up for success. Like I'd put my goals underneath my keys, so that I had to pick up my keys and see my goals. So I learned to work with myself, but I had this horrible relationship with not being perfect at these habits.
Oh, yeah.
And I was looking at everybody else that was talking about these habits, this daily 5, and thinking in my mind, 100% of the time, they do it. Every single day, they do it flawlessly, effortlessly. They do it. And then it wasn't until several years later, and I went on a really hard streak of a year and a half of not even missing one day, not taking any days off. And I almost killed myself, but it wasn't until after that point that I started to get to know some of the leaders that were teaching me in that industry and stuff. And then it sort of came out just, over cocktails one evening, oh yeah, I struggle with reading my goals, or I struggle with reading a book every day, or, 5 pages from a good book or what. And I was like, a what now? you're what? You're telling me that you don't do all of these things? And it really struck me because I would hold myself to that standard. And I would really beat myself up when I didn't, get to those 5 things, if I didn't check them off. I have literally come home and one of the things on the list was number of contacts. And I was one short or whatever. I had my PJs on and I was like, oh man, you can't do that to yourself. It was 11 o'clock at night. And I went and I prospected some random person for 7-Eleven. It wasn't really moving my business forward because I didn't care about quality or whoever it was. I just needed somebody who had a heartbeat so that I could say I did it. So I had this bad relationship with habits that I really had to work through. And I love, Jason, how you're talking about what makes you happy, because that's what started the conversation for me is what do I want my life to look like? And that question of what makes me happy or when am I the happiest, I struggled to even answer that question of like, what things do I like to do? It was like, oh, that's a mystery. I don't know what it is. So I'm so excited to hear more about your book, Jason. And do you dive into that? Like, and even examples of like, what are some habits that you utilize personally for happiness for yourself?
Yeah. And that is the beginning of it. The original question, I had my son, he's 20 the other day. He said, okay, Dad, pretend you're not my dad. Pretend you're just my habit coach. What habit should I start doing? And I said, oh man, we got to have a long conversation before we ever get to what habit you should start doing, because what we really need to identify are the things that bring you joy, the times when you feel growth in your life, the times when you feel like you're, the concept of flow, the concept of fulfillment. And then we can start identifying behaviors that tie into that. So I do make some suggestions in my book around core character development ideas, things like generosity, charity, belief, some of these things, integrity. I talk a little bit about humility and some of these characteristics that you tend to find in happy people and that most people identify and say, oh yeah, that's a good characteristic. I'd like to be more like that. But the primary initial exercise in the book is a self-discovery exercise of you kind of have to stop and almost close your eyes and think and answer some of those key questions. When have I felt growth in my life? When do I feel like I'm doing something that matters and adds value to the world? When am I doing something that I just do it just because I love to do it? And once we establish that, then we can start looking and saying, okay, let's make sure we incorporate that in on a consistent basis throughout your day. But so many people, Jodie, go through that experience of like, I'm living, I'm grinding, I'm striving, mostly based off of outside influences that have told me what should be important to me.
Yes.
And then we stop and think, okay, what's most critical to me and which things are actually bringing me satisfaction and happiness?
Mm-hmm.
It's an important point.
Question. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's vital. By the way, I also wanted to mention another point too, Jodie Lynn. You were telling about these people, these guru types who you'd been following, in your career, and you were referring to them with that proper pronoun "they," which I've long said that they have a lot to answer for. So I was really glad to hear that this particular group of they actually answered for their. That was really good. That was a breakthrough moment, I thought.
What's funny though, I have never actually asked them why do you tell people that you do these things with perfection when that's a lie? I've never asked that.
What a question. Oh boy, that would be a good one though.
Yeah, I'm kind of nervous to ask that question.
I don't blame you.
It's not. I know that from the heart space that they're not trying to
Sure.
tell people a lie, but it creates this facade. And for me, and I think it might be different for women and men. Now, you guys are both men, so you can answer this question. But for women, in our heads, there is this perfect woman. And Alison Armstrong talks about it. And this is where I first picked it up and where I first started to notice that I would beat myself up for not completing these tasks or these habits. And that they came from outside in influence, other people telling me what to do and me being like, okay, I am coachable. Let me do it. I can do that. But for women, what I realized learning this from Alison Armstrong is that women have this perfect woman in their heads that gets everything done on the checklist. And when we don't, meet that 100% of the checklist, where we differ with men is that we'll beat ourselves up. We're a piece of garbage. We're not good enough. All of these things. But a man, and I've watched my husband do this and it's crazy. He gets 2 on his list done and he's like, I'm the man. And I think that that's extraordinary because that's not the way that I was wired before. So I, to be honest, I quit all habits for a year because I was was like, okay, I just need to reprogram this relationship that I have with getting something done versus not getting something done, and being able to change, because for me, what makes me happy right now is completely different than it was 5 years ago. But I didn't have the, I don't know, compassion with myself to even let myself change my mind back then.
Jason, should we let her in on the secret?
Yeah. I want the secrets.
The secret is very simple. We may not be list-oriented the way the women are, but we are definitely oriented toward the perfect male. And most of us identify pretty early as, well, okay, I don't measure up to that. What am I going to do now? It's like, right? Isn't that it? I mean, like, none of us could possibly be that ideal male. It's not even humanly available to us.
No.
But
it is interesting. This gets me into a whole society and media thing. Because the fascinating thing is, when you look at media figures, women in media tend to be highly competent, accomplish everything, work, run the house, all of it. And most men in media are not too intelligent, don't contribute at home, right? You think like, I mean, I grew up watching Everybody Loves Raymond and Homer Simpson and like every
great
guy,
role models.
Yes, every guy in every TV show growing up, he's kind of this bumbling, barely coherent, hardly functioning human. So that's what we live up to, Jody. Like, that's the image of a perfect guy for us, is like, if I can do that, I am killing it. And women are then put into the position of comparing themselves with these, not over, but I mean, just unrealistic expectations.
Yeah. Well, I have to say it was a little different with my generation. With my generation, there were like two different male types of figures. One you could kind of summarize as the heroic sports figure. That was like that one idealized form. And the other was Father Knows Best. And those are the two that you aimed at, and you weren't ever going to hit either one of them.
No.
Which meant you were even half of what you could have been just by hitting one of them. So it was, I mean, it probably in some ways was an improvement to have Homer Simpson aim for. That at least was achievable.
Yeah. Yes.
So our society, our socialization is just crazy.
How we deal with, that is an important part, is how we deal with when we don't hit a habit. And I'll just share, I have right here my little tracker, and it's funny because this just happened to me, where I set my habits for the week, and I had 6. I had 6 things that I wanted to do every day. Midway through the week, I erased one because I had never gotten to it, and I identified maybe that's not so important. I was not
like that decision, by the way.
Successful on 6. My next week, I had 1. Because over that weekend, as I was processing, I thought, I can't get stressed out and overly worked out, overly emotionally connected with the idea that maybe I can't get 6 things done well every single day. Mm-hmm. So if I could only do one thing a day, what was the one thing? And this week I'm back up to 3. And have done pretty good with 3, but it is true that you can really set yourself up for failure by either a feeling that you have so many things that you have to get done, or feeling like if you don't get every single one of them done every single time, that you're a total letdown and failure. Both those things will derail you.
And I love the fact that you took a few of them off the list. How often do we feel like we're not allowed to do that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, how many times have we been told in different, arenas, if you will, that, this is what you got to do to be successful, or this is what you got to do to have a good marriage, or be a good parent, or, like fill in the blank. we're conditioned in so many ways in different arenas. Like this is the list of things that you got to do or else it won't work. And that itself is just simply a perception that we need to move out of and move into these habits of happiness.
Yeah. That's something I've actually picked up a lot just doing the show, because you get enough people coming onto the show telling their way that they succeeded at whatever it was that they were doing. And after a while, you realize, wow, there really isn't a single route there at all. In fact, half the time they can't even agree on what the route is. So it just shows how individualized the whole thing really can be. But we certainly don't think of it that way when we're, studying with a teacher. We think the teacher has the answer.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, when I work with people on habits, oftentimes that's one of the questions I ask is, which things are you currently doing that you need to stop doing? Or if you want to add this habit in, what's the action you're going to take away? Because we sometimes feel like it can just be add. But it turns out it can't. At some point, there's got to be either straight substitution or straight subtraction, or at least substitution, where you're reducing something that maybe you used to do, maybe you used to like it. I'll never forget, there was a podcast I listened to every single day. Gosh, probably for 8 years. I must have listened to that podcast every day for 8 years. And then I decided, I don't want to listen. Like, maybe that's not the best use of my time. Maybe I should. It was a sports podcast, so it wasn't like it was anything critical. But I was just certain that if I stopped listening to it, I would be so unhappy, I guess. I don't know what I thought would happen, but all of a sudden I just decided, okay, I'm just going to stop listening to it. And then like 3 weeks later, I was like, I don't miss that at all. Like there was absolutely zero regret. And even now, every once in a while, I'll go back and listen for like 5 minutes if there's a particular sports story I'm interested in. But man, now I think, oh my gosh, if I tried to listen to that every single day, what a total drain that would be.
Yeah. That's a vital question. Is it feeding you or is it stealing from you?
Yeah.
Because it can be either one.
Yep.
And it's going to be dependent on how you perceive it. It's not actually anything objective about the podcast or whatever it is we're talking about. It's not the thing itself. It's how you feel and how you see it.
I remember when I turned off my TV, not turned it off completely, but I just like shut off my cable because I never really watched TV anymore. That was one of the, habits, read a book instead of watching TV. And, I like got into reading and started enjoying it and stuff like that. So I canceled my cable subscription. And I remember my mom coming over and she like turns on the TV and she's like, why doesn't this thing work? And I'm like, I have Netflix. And she's like, yeah, but where's the TV? Like, I don't have it. She wanted to watch the Olympics or something. She's like, what do you mean you don't have TV? And I'm like, I don't have a subscription anymore. I never used it. So why pay, $200 for it or whatever it is? And she's like, but then how do you get your news? Like, are you missing out on your news? And it wasn't until that moment that I was like, am I? No. Like, I never even thought of it, but her perception is I'd be missing out. And I'm like, no, you tell me when something's going on. Like when something is big enough to affect my life, they call me or, it's on Facebook now or, whatever, right? I hear it from other sources, the radio or whatever. But it's interesting because you were talking about perceptions, and a lot of times our perceptions will stop us from changing that habit, deleting that habit, or adding something new because, I can't do that. I can't take that out because I'll miss something or, that fear of missing something.
Boy, fear. Yeah, that's the word there, isn't it? That fear is driving a lot of what goes on with habits, isn't it, Jason? Because, it not only influences what habits we're running away from, but it also influences what habits we're choosing.
Yeah, one of the challenges really with life is that so much of our life is fear-driven. And so a lot of our behaviors are driven off of unrealized expectation of what might happen should we possibly change. But what's interesting with that, and this is what I found for myself, is, I read Atomic Habits, very popular, well-known habit book. And in the beginning of that, James Clear tells the story of how when he was a high school student, he wanted to be a baseball player, wanted to be a college baseball player. And through a horrific accident at a practice one day, he's hit in the face with a baseball bat.
Mm.
And that sends him into this forced process of physical healing, mental healing, emotional healing that got him on the path of learning and studying about habits. And he does actually end up fulfilling his dream to come back and be a college baseball player. And but what was interesting for me is I looked at my life and I think I was sort of waiting for the equivalent of that incident to have the use to make change, right? Because I was absent that type of experience.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, what I was doing, I called it the sunset. His was a light switch.
Mm.
Mine was a sunset. But in a sunset, what we do is we constantly adjust to the new situation and define that situation as fine or acceptable. So it gets a little bit darker. And rather than taking action on the incoming darkness, we then adjust ourselves and say, nah, I can see okay. It's fine. You know, I did this as a kid. We'd be out playing basketball or kickball or whatever. Yeah, it's getting darker. It's fine. I can still see.
Yeah.
A little bit darker. Oh, it's fine. It's fine. I can see. A little bit darker. No, it's fine. I can still see. Until at some point, some kid gets clocked in the face with the basketball and you realize, oh, it's dark. Well, that happens to us in our lives. We just adjust and we say, no, this is fine. Life gets a little bit darker. No, this is fine. Gets a little darker. I'm okay. Maybe if I just grind a little harder, gets a little darker. No, I'm fine. But we never have the forced moment that makes us change. We have to decide, and that was my lesson from James Clear, was at any moment you can just decide, nope, today's the day. This is my change moment. And so many of us will just continue to drift absent any dramatic or traumatic experience because no, it's okay. I'm all right. It's fine. I'm okay. Even though in our heart we know it's getting darker.
Boy, what a great point. What a really great point.
I can see examples of myself doing both things, like watching it get darker and having like red flags, you know, show up in my life and be like, and it's going to be fine. It's not that bad. I can still see, you know, and then I've had the traumatic side of things as well, but it's interesting. I like how you put that.
Yeah. So my invitation, every time I talk with people, my invitation is to say, just let today be the day. Mm-hmm. Just decide like, nope, today's the day. Because tomorrow is either going to be a little bit lighter or a little bit darker. It's unlikely that tomorrow will be dramatically darker or significantly, but you just have to decide, is tomorrow going to be lighter or darker? And if you want it to be lighter, you have to be intentional about it. What I found is if you're okay with it getting darker, that's almost going to happen naturally. Mm-hmm. Life almost seems to flow naturally towards a slightly less, I don't know what it is, but slightly less fulfilling, slightly less happy, slightly less enjoyable, slightly less engaging. You have to be intentional about making it that way and choosing things that will bring you in that direction.
I know that you were kind of hedging there because you weren't really sure why it's happening, but give us your best guess. Why do you think that we do have that drift tendency toward it getting a little bit darker? Just like that's the normal direction.
Yeah. I can only kind of speak for myself and people that I talk with and work with. Is it seems as though initially we often strive to fill voids with immediate physical solutions.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we graduate, we go through our growing up years, however positive or negative those are, and then, okay, now I'm out on my own, and we start filling immediate physical needs. I'm going to need a job. I'm going to need a car. I'm going to need a house. I'm going to need some type of stable income. And it's almost like in the fulfilling of those things, there's some growth, there's some happiness, there's some movement in a direction. What the struggle, I think, for most people is once you hit certain levels, now you're not really growing anymore. Like you've kind of gotten there. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you've kind of ticked off 2 or 3 levels of his hierarchy of needs, and the next ones are self-esteem and self-actualization, and those don't just happen by accident. And so the alternative is we keep thinking we can just throw another physical something at the problem and it will make it better. So then we buy boats and jet skis and go on big vacations. And if I just had a better house or a better car, but it's not actually filling the need long term. We think it might because it seemed to in our earlier progression through our life, but then you just get to a point where it's only in the self-development. It's only in personal growth. It's only in now living a life of meaning and purpose that you'll find happiness, and having a bigger boat for most people is not a sufficient enough purpose to bring full happiness and joy. So we're kind of stuck on a treadmill that was working a little bit, but now is not getting us where we want to be.
Which happens a lot of the time simply because, like you say, we're looking externally. We're looking outside for the answers. It's the theme that keeps coming up over and over on this program is if you want to find the answers, you're not going to find them out there. You got to find them in here.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Which is also very disconcerting at the same time, by the way. Well, it is. I mean, let's be honest. It really is, because the other piece that goes along with it is we tend to do our best learning when we're least comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So just by even engaging in the journey, we're saying, okay, I'm ready for whatever that thing is that's going to come my way that I really don't want to have happen. Because that's where I'm going to do my most learning. But, oh, God, I don't really want to. I mean, it's sort of a please don't, please don't, please don't, please.
Yeah. And it's funny because I have back here behind me, these are yard signs because 2 of my kids are graduating from high school next week. And it is interesting. Yeah, that's a major accomplishment, huge thing. And then I kind of look back and I'm like, man, that was so far. It feels, to kids, that feels like I've finished something.
Mm.
Now I look back and I'm like, that was so far from any type of finish or end or, I mean, it was really just like, another step. And I have to continue to somewhat be uncomfortable, grow, continue to learn, so I can get there. But, and the first kind of warning I give people is around the size of the change that they want to implement. Mm-hmm. And you actually mentioned this, Walt, at the very beginning when you talked about walking, that you couldn't even walk a half mile, but gosh, if I just walked around the block, that was good. Well, so many of us, when we have that moment where we say, okay, I'm really going to change. I'm going to make my life different. We hope to do it so quickly and dramatically that we set ourselves up for almost guaranteed failure because it's not a sustainable change model. The change model that works is to actually start very small and make small incremental improvements over time. So when I'm talking with people and they say, yeah, I feel it, I want to make the change. Now I'm really bought in. Okay, what's the smallest possible thing you can do?
Yeah.
You want to be happier? What's the smallest possible happiness habit? And let's start there, because trying to do too many things or too big of a thing will never work.
This is a really interesting point. And the reason I say it's interesting is we live by almost acclamation. We almost all agree we live in the age of instant gratification. And when you live in an era of instant gratification, a couple of things go along with that. One, you want instant gratification, so you have to have a result quickly. Two, it means that if you're aiming for something big, you're going to be disappointed, so you're not getting your instant gratification. So the solution is actually to feed yourself something small so you can get the instant gratification, which is really, I mean, it's like a little cycle going on there.
Yeah.
But it's also a productive cycle.
Yeah, because now you can focus in on momentum rather than motivation. When people feel that, okay, I'm going to make a change. Like when I felt like, okay, this is as dark as I'm going to let it get. I'm not letting it get any darker than this. I was really motivated. And luckily I had read enough habit books, because what's fun is there's a whole handful of them out there. I knew that starting small was the key. And so I just focused in on a small, simple implementation so that I could build momentum, because that's that feeling of, man, if I don't go for a walk, I feel it. If I don't get outside in a day, I feel it. And even when it's cold, the momentum is driving me to do it anyway. If you base off of motivation, you might do it once for 30 minutes and then you hate the whole process anyway because it hurts so bad and this sucks. And then tomorrow you're so busy, you're like, when will I ever find 30 minutes to do this? I'll never find 30 minutes to do this consistently. So that just feeds into the story you're already telling yourself of, you can't do this. Why would you change? It's not that bad. The current level of darkness is acceptable. The current level of your physical health, financial health, personal, mental, emotional health, whatever it is, you're going to just convince yourself, no, this is fine, because you're fighting a losing battle of motivation rather than building the momentum that will push you along the way.
Really good stuff.
So small builds momentum.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm also reminded too that, as we pursue these goals and we're trying to set up our lives and make the changes and all that kind of thing, and we're dealing with the instant gratification piece. But by the same token, we're also really good at taking our imaginations and turning them either into these massive dreams that are so far out of reach that we can't possibly get there, or more commonly to take these negative situations and turn them into the most awful situations they can possibly be. We really don't do very well at those little incremental areas. We're either looking at really big or really horrible. There's not a whole lot in between that goes on.
Yeah. So, and when you make these small incremental changes, then that allows you really to kind of have the success, the growth, that instant gratification that you were just mentioning, because now, every time, even if it's only 5 minutes, I can be like, yes, I did it. Yes, I did it. Yes, I did it. And you start to build the momentum of, yes, I did it. That really starts to change your mindset of who you are as a person, because we often, and in fact, almost always, behave consistent with the way we see ourselves. Am I the type of person that exercises? Am I the type of person that goes on a walk? Am I the type of person who reads every day? Am I the type of person who is generous? Am I a kind person? And our behaviors instantly match that, because that's going on in our brain. We think, I should go for a walk. And instantly the question in your brain is, well, am I that type of person? And if you are, then you go do it. And if you're not, then you don't. I'm not a walking person. Why would I go on a walk? I'm not a walking person. And so when you do it small, suddenly you're like, yeah, I am a person who goes on walks. And then you think I should go on a walk. Oh yeah, I am the type of person who goes on a walk. I should, stop and help this person who's pushing her cart through the grocery store parking lot, and it looks like it's heavy, and she's got 2 kids, and I should probably just say, hey, can I help you with that for a second? Am I the type of person that does that? Yeah, I'm a kind, generous person. Okay, then I'll do it. So when you build momentum, it starts to change the view that you have of yourself. And so while you probably weren't always the type of person who went on walks, but
True.
Now that's perfectly consistent with who you are as a person. And so it's perfectly natural to go on a walk.
It's funny. I never really thought of myself as what kind of type person I am. What's my type? In fact, I resisted the idea of types, but I'm looking at it from your perspective and like, that's an interesting way to look at it. I never really thought of it that way.
I can see why some things haven't worked for me. Am I the type of person that goes to the gym? No. I never grew up in a town. Like I grew up on the farm. So in our small town that was close, like it was still like 20 minutes away from where we lived. There was no gym there. That didn't exist in the place where I grew up. It didn't exist on the farm. Like you wanted muscle, throw some bales, that was it. And I'm still that farm girl. That's the way that I see myself. So I see myself as like strong, and I don't mind hard work, like physical hard work. And I'll go out and I'll work in the garden. I'll work on the farm, but I can't. Then that's no problem. I could do that for hours and hours and hours a day. But I cannot get myself to drive to some gym to go inside. And I never could. But I see now that to change that, I would have to see myself different, see myself as somebody who does go to the gym. I think that's profound.
I'm wondering if we are really type driven, and if there are people like me who never really think of themselves as being of a particular type, well, that kind of suggests that I'm doing it subconsciously or unconsciously without realizing it. I wonder how much I'm being driven by my non-identified types.
Now you start getting into things like, is the type that Walt is the type of person who kind of likes to zig when everybody else zags and be a little bit different and unique so that he doesn't. And so the type of person you are is the type of person who avoids types of people.
Interesting theory. That's not entirely inaccurate. There's some accuracy to that. Yeah. Because I definitely had many times where the crowd went one way. I said, well, okay, have fun. Mm-hmm. I ain't going that way. I'm not sure if I did it as a contrarian, but yeah, there are times. Don't we all do that at some point?
Yeah.
I think so. It's funny. Like I can look back, and see that in myself. There are very specific examples I have of things that I like for no other reason than most people didn't like them. And so I started liking them just to be different. And now 30 years later, I'm like, that's who I am. But the only reason I did it initially was as a form of protest or differentiation. I didn't want to go along with the crowd and be just like everybody else. So I'm going to like this other sports team, or I'm going to like this other sport, or I'm going to listen to this different kind of music, or watch this different type of TV show or whatever, just because.
You said differentiation. I would even perhaps suggest individuation.
Yeah.
Because we want to be individuals.
For me, I wanted to be just like everybody else.
Did you really?
Yeah. Don't think that I'm weird and I'm standing outside of the circle. Like, let me into the circle. I think for me, I never wanted to be different. Like people used to call me all the time, like a cowgirl. Like, I'm not a cowgirl. I just live on a farm. I didn't want to be different from everybody else. I wanted to be like everyone else. And I think that got me wrapped up into a lot of things that like in a trajectory of my life of going in one direction and not even realizing why I was going in that direction versus where my heart was leading me.
Mm.
I'm reminded of an article that I saw online within the last year and a half, something like that. It was the story of a study that had been done live in a middle school here on the East Coast of the U.S. And they were looking at the social structure of the kids in that middle school. And they were trying to understand and identify certain trends. You know, why is it that certain kids are the popular kids? You know, who sets the trends? Who follows the trends? All that kind of thing. And very interesting. There was a lot of intricacy to the article. But one of the things that kind of came out was almost, I won't say everyone, a high percentage of the kids were describing the same kind of thing that you were. They were trying to find their way to fit in. And then in the next breath, they were describing how they were resisting it. So on the one hand, on the other hand.
Mm-hmm.
And that played out a lot. The ones who were not doing that so much were the ones who were already at the top of the hierarchy.
Because they knew who they were?
Or they were at the top of the hierarchy so they gained social acceptance. I'm not sure which.
I think my fitting in came all from like trauma of being in junior high and not fitting in. Like having hand-me-downs and getting, like picked on and whatever. Like I got my first jobs just so I could buy clothes that I liked to wear and wouldn't be
really
more fun. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, it's interesting why we do the things we do.
Yeah. Then we create life patterns and habits based off of childhood traumas. And 40 years later, we're going to counseling because like I'm in a series of habits that is not working for my life. And the whole reason is because in 7th grade, somebody made fun of my hand-me-downs. And you're like, oh my gosh.
Right? Yes. That really drove me to have like expensive clothes and like luxury items and live in the city in a high rise. And like, I don't have any of those things anymore because I didn't actually want them. I wanted them because I thought I would fit in because I was trying to avoid that trauma that I experienced when I was a kid.
Or to flip it around, you wanted to get to that feeling you thought you would achieve if you actually had those clothes. Now you'd be in a different feeling place, so you wouldn't have to deal with that kind of a trauma anymore.
Yeah, we're right back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The things don't give you that next level.
This is what was the whole driver of this whole habit book and podcast and all is saying, okay, at a certain point you got to stop and think, which behaviors are bringing the most? And what you mentioned about Jody Lynn, I'd be interested to hear because one of the things I've learned is that your morning process is critical to this successful outcome. That for most people, as long as you live a morning process of waking up in the last minute possible to get yourself or your kids or your family ready and out the door, and you wake up frenetic and frantic, the likelihood of catching back up to any level of self awareness and a feeling of fulfillment is almost impossible to do. So changing that morning, and you mentioned that about Jody Lynn, a morning routine that might be helpful or impactful for people.
Yeah. Well, for me, when I wake up in the morning, obviously, like there's some things that I do that are just like necessities of the body, necessities of my dog, or things like that. But then once those things are done, some habits that I've ingrained is drinking water. So I intentionally drink a lot of water. And now I'm starting to incorporate blessing that water, like giving gratitude to that water so that water can heal my body. I'm already drinking it, so I might as well, see what I can play with there. And then I take some time to just reflect on, how I'm feeling and just what's going to happen throughout the day, not really planning so much what's going to happen because I've already looked at my schedule and I know what I have, high level things, but like reconnecting with me. And I loved actually one of our recent guests over the last couple of weeks. She talked about that, reconnecting with you, and you've got all of these things on the go and then being led to the things that are the most important. So for me, that's a big habit, is just reconnecting and centering in the morning and being like, okay, I'm good. We're good to go. I'm ready to start.
When you were mentioning the bit about how you bless the water, are you influenced by like the work of Professor Emoto, who did all the thing with, putting emotions onto water and then freezing it and looking under the microscope to see what the patterns look like and that kind of thing?
I've seen it. I haven't studied it too much. I just saw a TikTok just recently that said, my father started blessing his water, or like started saying thank you to his water. And she noticed like the difference between their 2 cups. His started to bubble and hers didn't, even though they got it from the same source. It was sitting right beside each other. And so she started doing these tests, and her father was really ill, I think terminal, and he was starting to heal himself just by simply having this gratitude for this water. So I thought, hey, that sounds cool. I would like to have a healthier body, just overall health, and give whatever I need to my body. So I've started to incorporate that practice into.
I got to start incorporating that. I haven't been doing it in a while, but I remember at one point I was testing, and I tested 2 identical, 2 waters for the same source, that kind of thing, and did the same kind of thing, blessing one of them, and it tasted better. There was an actual distinct improvement in taste in the one that I had thrown the love at. I was still blown. To this day, I'm blown away by that. And I don't know why I haven't taken that and turned it into a regular practice. As I'm thinking about, like, well, come on, Walt, that was obvious. What do you do? How much more do you need to have for evidence before you're going to do it? Which goes back to the whole question of establishing habits. So, Jason, I'm going to throw it into your camp. What do I have to do before I finally decide I'm going to do this thing?
Because I think of this gratitude one that I do every morning is write down 3 things that I'm grateful for. I've got my little gratitude journal right here. And one of my early practices every morning is write down 3 things I'm grateful for. What's fascinating is, just like you, I had heard that so many times and knew that was a healthy behavior, knew it was an important behavior. Why am I not doing it? One thing that you can try to make things easier is tying it together with an existing habit. Because oftentimes, well, just like you said, we intend to do it, but in the moment we don't think about it. And Jody Lynn actually mentioned this. She gets up, has some personal behaviors that she does, takes care of her dog, and then gets into the habit. So if you decide, I want to drink more water every day, I want to incorporate in the health benefits of drinking water.
Okay, blessed water at that too.
Yeah. Do it immediately after letting out the dog. You're already letting out the dog every day. So letting out the dog every day becomes the trigger. Charles Duhigg talks about triggers to our behaviors. Letting out the dog becomes the trigger that makes you think, oh yeah, I gotta now drink my water. I do the same thing. Let out my dog, write down 3 things that I'm grateful for. And it's the only time I've ever been successfully consistent, is because I tie it. So you already brush your teeth, you already take a shower, you already drink your morning hot chocolate or coffee or tea or water or whatever. You already drive to work, stop at a stoplight, check your email. You probably have, every person has at least a dozen existing behaviors within the first 2 hours of your day that you could tie something to increase dramatically the likelihood of consistency. Now, to your one in specific, you're already drinking the water. So the idea of how would you, remind yourself, tie that in, I would say just start with one instance of it a day. And if you don't go through that process every time you drink water every day, okay, it'll build. But if just that morning first drink of water every day, before I drink my first water every day, this is my pattern. I'm going to express gratitude. I'm going to, meditate. I'm going to, if you're a person of faith, I'm going to pray, whatever that is, tie it to an existing behavior, and your consistency increases almost immediately.
I love that. And I already have in mind what it is I'm going to tie it to. As soon as you explain, tie it to something else, I said, oh, I got it. Yes, I know which one to do. Because every day, you may know about the Wordle puzzle that people do every day. I'm a Wordle guy. Wordle is one of the very first things I do every single day. So, what a perfect time to be blessing my water and drinking it while I'm doing the Wordle. It's like ideal. It's a perfect match. So I'm going to go with that.
Do you start with the same word every day?
Yeah, I have a starter word. Yeah, I have a starter word. Mine is orate.
Oh, okay. I kind of cheat because I have 3 starter words. I run through 3 words and then start guessing from there.
Well, I used to have another one, and then my starter word came out as the word that day. So I said, well, I'll never get the first one again if I don't change the starter word. So I got to change the starter word.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a perfect time because it's deliberately ingrained because I love doing that puzzle, and it's kind of a way of getting myself up for the day. Like, okay, here's my first thing. I'm going to get that dose of dopamine hitting the system because I got the word and all that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, what a perfect time to tie in the water and blessing the water. So thank you both for that. Because you're both contributing to that. I love that. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think too, now, Jason, as you're like talking about tying things to processes, I see how I've naturally done certain things. Like my husband, we have a greenhouse business. And so we start a lot of the plants inside the shop and everything like that. So one of my jobs is to turn on the lights for the plants. And I was like forgetting because it's only during like February, March, April, May that it happens. It's not a whole year thing. So I put a reminder on my phone so it like flashes up or whatever. But what really did it for me was not the reminder, but it was the way that I walk through the space. Like I make the same walk every morning. When I come back from outside with the dog, I come in and I take a left towards the plants and then I come back this way. So I actually like changed my, like the route that I take inside my home to walk right by it to be like, oh, duh, they're right there.
Very good.
Environment dictates a significant. That's the other one that you can do. If you're wanting to start a habit and it's hard to be consistent with it, change your environment. As we've been talking here, I mentioned my gratitude journal and it's literally right there. And I mentioned my daily tracker and it's right there. And I mentioned flossing. This one's less apt, but literally flosser, right?
there.
Setting yourself up for success.
Thank you cards is right there because I like to write a handwritten thank you card every week. And the book that I am reading is right there because when it's time. So almost every major habit that I want to do, it's like, this is my little habit. Right here. Yeah. Almost everything I want to do, I can get to it from sitting right here because I spend hours a day right here.
And it's accessible.
In those moments,
it's right there. It's not like it's over in a closet or in a drawer somewhere. It's accessible. It's right there where it's just so easy to grab it. That is, and that's been proven. That there's studies showing just how powerful that is. Yeah. I love that. Really.
And if you have a habit you want to break, whatever it is, make it more difficult. If you're
not
quite Jody Lynn's level of just turning off your cable, just take the batteries out of your remote, put the batteries in a drawer, and put your book on the table. And when you're sitting there and you think, oh my gosh, I'd have to get up, go get the batteries, put the batteries in the remote, turn the TV on, or, oh, my book's right here. I guess I'll read. Your behavior will change almost immediately because of the change in environment.
Wow. This has been good. This has been a good conversation. Really, really good. I like this.
So good.
A couple things we need to get from you, Jason, because we're about ready to wrap up here. First thing, the book, Happily Ever Happens. I presume it's available in all the usual places. Am I right about that?
Amazon.
Yeah. But I mean, I imagine you could probably even order it in an independent bookstore if you really wanted to. I mean, you could probably get it anywhere. I would think that's the way these things usually work.
Yeah. I published it through Amazon, so it's available some other places, but I know.
But not all. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay.
If you walk into your local neighborhood bookstore, you might not find it, but
no, No, you don't necessarily find it, but you can order it, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
They often have access to the same catalog. So, yeah. Okay.
Yep.
And then, but the more important question is if somebody wants to learn more about Jason Harwood and the stuff that, you're doing beyond the book. I mean, I imagine that there's more to your life than Happily Ever Habits, and you have more contributions that you've made. How do they find out about you?
Website is good. And it turns out that jasonharwood.com is like a real estate person. So I am the jasonharwood.com.
Okay.
Jason. And Instagram, Facebook, social media, LinkedIn, you can find me there too. I'm the Jason Harwood, or just thejasonharwood.com. We'll have links to everything.
We'll make sure we include a link in the show notes too, so people can find their way to the website easily. One last thing I want to tell you too that I always tell all of our guests, because when people come onto the show, everybody who comes onto the show is a giver. There's been one exception in the last 10 plus years. All the rest are givers. So it's like 99.99%. And givers have a tendency to give continuously, consistently. That's what makes them givers. Hey, how about that insight? But one of the pieces that goes along with it is there are a lot of people who consume their content and they never see it. They never hear it. They never know about it. Sometimes they do, but very often they don't. And I think that needs to be recognized more often. So on behalf of all those people that you've never met and that you've never seen who have been taking in your content and picking up on it and learning from it and putting it to work in their lives and getting results, on their behalf, thank you for what you've been doing and what you're continuing to do, because you're making a difference in this world.
Well, I appreciate that. And it has been so fun talking with you and learning together. And I appreciate the opportunity to share and hopefully, bring some better, a little bit lighter day tomorrow than what it was today.
Jody Lynn, top takeaway. You can only pick one thing. One thing that's the top takeaway for today. What's your best takeaway?
Oh, that's not fair. Well, there was a lot here, but I think the thing that was the most impactful for me was the way that you described life getting darker, life getting lighter. And what really hit me is this societal belief that we have that, that it's not the norm to have this beautiful, exciting, wonderful life, where that's kind of what we've been taught, and slowly we allow our lives to get darker, but it doesn't have to be that way. Mm-hmm. And the reminder of, I'm sorry, I'm picking too many things small, but the reminder that it just takes something small to step towards that light. And that's something that you can do today to have a brighter tomorrow.
No, you're not sorry about it. And I love you for it. So, Jason Harwood, thank you so much for joining us. Really do appreciate you being on the show today. Jody Lynn, as usual, love having you on as well. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.